Thank you, gentlemen, for those very heartfelt words. He does not wish to speak, but I would like to acknowledge Michael Obradovich from the USS Antares, that in the back row there. Ron Brown loves Mount Diablo from the bottom to the top. Every squirrel hole, every foot trail, every part and parcel, whether green, icy, or scorched. As member and leader of Save Mount Diablo for 13 years, Ron has set a determined goal: to preserve the land on and about the mountain by acquisitions, to defend the mountain and its foothills from eager land developers, and to restore the natural habitat of the mountain for wildlife and us, so that we all may enjoy the mountain's bounty. A few years ago, Ron was noticing that the Remembrance Beacon was suffering from cataracts and arthritis. And so he went to work, cutting through layers of red tape and then gathering together invaluable volunteers and a whole lot of money. Surgery was performed on the ailing beacon from stem to stern, efficiently and quickly, the Ron Brown way. And now the restored beacon shines through with clear and new lenses, and its rickety old joints have been replaced. Ron, we are so proud to have you here as our main speaker today. Especially the Pearl Harbor survivors, who deeply thank you and all the volunteers for giving new life and new light to a dimming symbol that they cherish so much. And they're very proud to have you as a featured speaker today. Ladies and gentlemen, Pearl Harbor survivors, the tireless executive director of Save Mount Diablo, Mr. Ron Brown.
Thank you, Wayne. Thank all of you. I'm actually quite tired. And I'm a little taken aback by some of the things that have been said today, because this wasn't supposed to be about me or Save Mount Diablo at all. It was supposed to be about the Pearl Harbor survivors. But additionally, because every year this commemorative beacon lighting is to remind all of us about the Pearl Harbor survivors and what they went through. I was asked actually to speak about the process of the restoration and what it took to get it together and how we actually did it. Because it really, this year, is a story about what the community did in honor of these folks and what it did to set a stage for the future and for future generations about what a community should do and how it should respond to its heroes and people who have sacrificed. So that's one thing. The second thing is, a lot of people have said a lot of things that I had in my notes, so I'm going to have to try and be careful not to be too duplicative. But as the executive director of Save Mount Diablo, we got involved with the Pearl Harbor survivors in the beacon lighting on December 7th on top of the mountain in 2006, when it seemed like they could use a little help from the community. And we had some things in common with them. The first official meeting of Save Mount Diablo was on December 7th, 1971. December 7th, we had that in common. The beacon sat atop Mount Diablo. the very icon that our organization existed to preserve, defend, and to restore. And restoring the beacon that sits at its crown is indeed part of our mission. To maintain the historic significance of the beacon and the mountain was important for us. So the Eye of Diablo, the beacon that sits atop the mountain. Its history goes back to 1928 when it was an aviation beacon in the early days of aviation to help nighttime flying cross country and up and down the West Coast. It was lit for the first time in 1928 and continued shining every night until December 8th, 1941. It was turned off on December 8th, following the bombing of Pearl Harbor, as part of the blackout of the West Coast. Following the conclusion of the war and the advent of radar, the beacon system was no longer needed in order to help with aviation. Radar was in place. And so the beacon wasn't lit again until December 7th, 1964, when Fleet Admiral Chester Nimitz, working along with the Pearl Harbor Survivors Association, relit the beacon December 7th, 1964, and it's been lit every December 7th since then. That brings us to a couple of years ago that was alluded to when I began looking at the beacon, and some of our volunteers got involved in helping with the ceremony, and the beacon was old. It was showing its age, 85 years sitting on top of the mountain, subjected to the kinds of intense weather conditions that actually kept us off of the mountain today. And it took its toll, and as you heard, it was pretty jerry-rigged and beat up, battered and bruised, to the point where one of our volunteers before one of the ceremonies had to literally spin around for about a half an hour to get that thing warmed up until its old bones could get it going on its own, and keep it going all night long. So at that point we said we wanted to take care of trying to restore this beacon. We set about to do it. You heard about us going to Assemblymember Buchanan and the role that she played in obtaining unanimous approval from the California State Legislature in order to allow a nonprofit organization, Save Mount Diablo, to restore the beacon with the use of volunteers at no cost to the state at all, just to our organization, an unheard of concept. So getting approval to do the project was only the first key component. The second key component was figuring out how we were going to do it. And I went to one of our significant volunteers, Dick Heron, a retired engineer who we knew had a lot of talents. Talked to him and he said, sure, he'd be glad to work on this project. He and I were able to recruit John Gallagher, and John Stewart, the Beacon Boys, that you've met them all today. And that was the dream team that was able to take this thing. And they gave up the next 2 years of their lives to work on this pretty extensively, unbelievably. The amount of research that they put into maintaining historic significance, bringing in a varied group of people. And it was also the sons and daughters who stepped forward because they knew we were going to need some money to get this project done. And they gave us a $3,000 donation to start the initial fundraising drive. We figured we needed to raise $100,000. Joan Morris, a columnist in the Contra Costa Times, said she would write a column about it and keep running it in her column and asking her readers to support the restoration project. That article in the paper caught the attention of Chris Lesher Ehring, a board member from the Dean and Margaret Lesher Foundation. And it was through Chris's efforts that she got the Lesher Foundation to make a $50,000 challenge grant to us. And it was very quickly after we announced that we were able to raise the remaining $50,000 in a matter of weeks from hundreds and hundreds of community members responding to this cause. Today we have Steve Lesher, who's a member of that board with us, because it was his sister Chris who led the charge on that. And unfortunately, she passed away before we were able to get the beacon back on top. But today's also about her, a member of the community who cared and wanted to make sure that their stories last on into future generations. Thank you, Steve. And now I want to tell you a few other people that were involved in this. It was Standard Oil that put the beacon up initially in 1928 as part of an East Coast string of beacons. And their subsequent or successor organization, Chevron, in our community, they stepped forward and they put together some public service announcements that we were able to run in order to help us raise the money. They also contributed $10,000 to the campaign. And yeah. The Beacon Boys were able to recruit dozens of highly skilled craftsmen, electrical and mechanical engineers, optical physicists, historians, photographers, and dozens of other skilled areas to become part of the Beacon Restoration Committee. And they organized a work plan that rivals any professional operation that you can ever imagine. But a major challenge was how we were going to get that beacon off of the mountain to restore it and then to get it back again. Well, that's when our friends, page 9 is missing. There it is. Okay. Oh, yeah, I remember our friends. How could I forget them? At the Shell Martinez refinery. When they heard about what we were trying to do, and they said, how can we help? I mentioned that we needed a crane. And within 2 days, we had a signed agreement and a pledge from Shell because they said, we can do that. And they got their friends, John Cooper from Maxim Crane, and with Shell and Maxim, they donated their services in order to lift that crane off, but they didn't have to make their employees do this. The riggers and technicians and employees from Shell, from their public relations department to the guys who are climbing on those derricks at the refinery every day, they did this out of the love in their hearts for these guys again and for what their contribution to the community was. And these oil company and crane company folks wanted to give something back, and they gave back big time. And so, with the help of Shell and Maxim and Chevron, the Lesher Foundation, the Contra Costa Times, the support we received from Danita Rodriguez and the California State Park System, we were able to restore the beacon. But I'm just going to really quickly give you some other names that were also part of this. Redwood Painting, Rex Bothell from Global Village Construction in Concord, where the actual restoration work took place. Hart Electric, Sandeck, the Las Positas College welding class, Peterson Sheet Metal, staff from the Contra Costa Times, Garavaglia Architecture, HMS Incorporated, DTC Stage and Studio, San Ramon Valley Fire Protection District, Diablo Woodworkers, and the many staff and volunteer members from the staff at Save Mount Diablo. And the list goes on and on. So I want to recap this. A local newspaper, a local family foundation, an incredible team of highly skilled project coordinators giving nearly 2 years of their life to this project, dozens of local businessmen, hundreds of individual financial donors, a state agency, an elected member of the assembly, 2 oil companies, and an environmental organization. Oil companies and an environmental organization. Oh my. And that's the backstory about the restoration of what went into getting us here today.